This screencast is a lecture for Rape of the Lock, Cantos 4 and 5. Sometimes when you have a complicated text, I find that it helps to map it out. A map of the first canto would look something like this. Belinda is asleep in her bed and she has a dream, and the dream is telling her to beware, and we know that she's supposed to beware of man. But of course, when she gets up, she forgets all about her dream and goes to her toilette to begin her preparations for the day. Then we go to the second canto where she boards this barge that goes to the Queen's card party at Hampton Court. We're told about this beautiful cross that she wears around her neck and how her she makes the cross more beautiful. And then we're told about the two locks of her hair, so that it's just in two locks behind her head. We encounter the Baron making his altar to love and praying for her locks. And then we come to Ariel addressing the other fairies and telling them that they need to be really watchful. And then they all get into their positions to guard Belinda at the Queen's party. Canto 3, then, it would be the the we're at Hampton Court, and the Queen is there, and people are gossiping, and that we know that reputations are dying because of this gossiping is pretty malicious. And then we have the game of ombre, and Belinda is playing that against the Baron and another fellow. And then we have coffee and berries. And then Clarissa gives the Baron her embroidery scissors. And because he loves Belinda so much, he just needs to have a lock of her hair. And so he cuts off her hair, her lock, and this is her reaction basically. And this is his reaction. He's very, very proud of his trophy. So let's think then about Canto 4. We can touch on the plot of it in the same way. As we begin this canto, Belinda is dwelling on the loss of her lock. She's incredibly angry. She's more angry than anybody has ever been. She's lost the protection of Ariel because she didn't have a virginal thought in her mind. So now the evil sprite Umbriel comes into play. And umber, it means earth. And so we can see that Umbriel is a gnome. He flies to the cave of spleen, and that's a word that means melancholy. You might want to check your list of epic conventions here, and Umbriel meets with the Queen of Spleen. We are told in line 58 that this queen rules women to 50 from 15. This is a big hint about what Pope is referring to here. These are the childbearing years, the years in a woman's life when she's menstruating. So Pope is using the cave of spleen as a metaphor for PMS. This is one of those places in the poem that I can tell that it was written by a man. He is basically saying to Arabella Fermer that maybe she wouldn't have gotten so upset about the cutting of her lock if she weren't suffering from PMS. I don't know about you, but there's just nothing worse than experiencing genuine sadness or anger or remorse over something and then have someone completely negate the validity of your emotion by saying something like, "Are you on your period?" If Pope's purpose in writing this poem was truly to help calm the situation, I think he just threw some fuel on the fire there. So the queen gives Umbriel a bag and a vial to take back with him. He pours the contents of the bag over Belinda's head. It's a bag of sighs, sobs, and passions, and this causes Belinda to rise up and make an impassioned speech about her lost hair in lines 95 through 120. She says, quote, "Was it for this you took such constant care the bodkin comb and essence to prepare? For this your locks in paper durance bound? For this with torturing irons wreathed round? For this with fillets strained your tender head and bravely bore the double loads of lead?" In other words, she spends a lot of time on her hair, curling it with hot irons that were heated in the fireplace, probably occasionally burning her head in the process. She slept in uncomfortable rollers and suffered other discomfort just to have her beautiful hair, and now it is ruined because of the Baron. It seems like she went through all of this work for nothing. So she sends her friend Sir Plume to ask the Baron to give back her lock. She's afraid that the Baron will show it off to everyone like a trophy, and that people will think that she gave it to him as a love token. Remember, this gossip is really big and frantic and nasty among her peers. Plume is unsuccessful in his mission, though, because the Baron refuses to return the lock. So Belinda realizes that there's only one thing she can do now. In line 167, she says that she is going to have to cut off her other lock. If you'll remember, we talked about how her hair was done in two long locks hanging down the back of her head. The lock that the Baron cut off was not some little unobtrusive lock of her hair. It was a huge amount, and now she has to cut off the rest of her hair to make it match up. He has ruined her looks at a time in her life that she should be on the marriage market. Pope thinks this isn't such a big deal, but I would contend that it is a very big deal for a young woman such as Arabella, aka Belinda, in the time that she lived. So the canto ends with her wish in lines 175 to 76. Quote, "O hadst thou, cruel, been content to seize hairs less in sight, or any hairs but these." When I said that Pope was a hedgehog, this is one of those places that you can really see it. Basically, he is having Belinda say that she wishes that the Baron had raped hairs that people couldn't see, in other words, her pubic hairs. This is implying that Belinda would have rather been physically raped than to have her hair cut off. At least no one would have had to have known. This part of the poem always makes me want to kick Pope right in the ass. No woman would ever say this. Never. Once again, I don't think it would do a very good job of diffusing the situation that he's supposed to be addressing. So, we arrive at the final canto of the poem, Canto 5. This begins with Clarissa's speech about beauty, that women should think more about their inner beauty than their outward appearance. On the surface, this sounds like really good advice and words that Arabella and Belinda should hear. But think back. Who was it who gave the Baron the scissors to cut off Belinda's lock? It was Clarissa. Knowing that fact, how does it change your reaction to her speech? Here is someone who was involved in the act and then berating the victim because she is upset. Personally, I think Clarissa is one of those women who will become a gnome after she dies. She's a prude for sure. The other women present didn't think much of Clarissa's speech either, because they soon engaged in general combat with the men in the room. Of course, this combat isn't waged with swords, but with looks. I'm sure that you've heard the expression, if looks could kill. Well, here they can. The women are killing the men with their looks and reviving them with their smiles. Belinda finally goes one-on-one with the Baron, armed with her bodkin. Now, a bodkin is something like a hairpin. It was an ornament that women wore in their hair. In lines 88 through 96, we learn the history of Belinda's bodkin, how it was passed down to her through the generations from her great-great-grandfather. This history elevates the bodkin, comparing it to a mythical sword such as Hrunting and Beowulf. Once again, the trivial is described in epic terms. So when she defeats the Baron, she demands that he restore the lock in line 103. Of course he can't restore it. He might give it back to her, but she can't put it back on her head. In fact, he tells her that he can't even find the lock, that it has gone missing. And we are told that the hair has ascended to the heavens and has become a shooting star that everyone can admire. The poem ends with a direct address to Arabella. Then cease, bright nymph, to mourn thy ravished hair, which adds new glory to the shining sphere. Not all the tresses that fair head can boast shall draw such envy as the lock you lost. Like Shakespeare, Pope is telling her that she will achieve a certain immortality because he has written about her in this poem. I wonder, though, if Arabella was all that pleased about this sort of immortality. Remember that vicious gossip that was circulating during the Queen's card party? Well, it seems to me that no one would want the gossip to be about them. As though having her hair chopped off weren't bad enough, and cause for some serious gossip, I'm sure, Pope has to immortalize the event in poetry so that Arabella will never hear the end of it. It is as though he is victimizing her again.